most welcome. Everybody's welcome. And thank you so much for coming today to our show on CEO assessment and selection, catching the fraudster CEO, stopping those con men, those crooked cats dead in their tracks. We're going to be looking at real things that you can do during an assessment to make that fraudster slip up. And of course, I have some very experienced people here on the panel with me. Oh my God, I think we also have an ex-British intelligence officer on this session with us here. So we have some great resources. Jonathan, it's really a pleasant surprise to see you. I don't know if I'm allowed to say your I don't know if I was allowed to say that publicly. But anyway, he turned his camera off, so maybe I wasn't supposed to say that. Anyway, really excited to see you. Let me introduce my co-hosts. I have one gentleman who is our tech, and in this digital era that you really need to be tech savvy. So we have a man who started his career out in Silicon Valley with big names like Sun Microsystems, and also started his own .com startup in the searing fires of Silicon Valley. Amongst the Zuckerbergs and everyone else that was over there. And then he moved into high street finance, leading the digitization program for Bank of America for several divisions as a VP of IT. Then tracing back his Arabic roots, comes back into the Middle East where he was the CIO of Jordan Bank of Jordan. And then seeing this huge need for digitization has started one of the leading digitization consultancies in the region, helping companies digitize with digital Analytica. It's the founder and CEO, Mr. Nasser Zagha. Welcome.
Thank you, Shane, for the introduction.
Great to be here. And my other co-host, who brings a huge amount of leadership experience to the table, a man who hails from the big island of Australia, wanted to have an international career, joined a company, Procter & Gamble, also wrote the book on a lot of the organizational psychology and leadership practices that most companies use today. Was a divisional HR head for the prestige care fragrances across Asia as an HR head, and then was a global CHRO, one of 3 for Maersk Shipping, looking over 100 companies. Massive amount of senior leadership hiring experience. Then he was the global CHRO of First Abu Dhabi Bank, one of the largest banks in the Middle East. And now he has had a humanitarian heartstring and has joined Plastic Bank, which works to remove plastic from this world while helping emancipate I guess it's better for you to describe it, what exactly it is, Pete, but it's a fantastic company. Please welcome Mr. Peter Baker, who will give us a little bit insight on what Plastic Bank does exactly.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Hi, Shane, and hi, everyone. It's great to be here for this hopefully fascinating discussion and interesting topic. Yeah, I'm Pete. I'm the head of people and culture at Plastic Bank. We are empowering the regenerative society by removing plastic from riverbeds and beaches before it gets into the ocean, and using that as currency to improve the lives of some of the most impoverished people in the world. So it's a privilege to be part of that, but also I still love being part of these discussions as well. And I think we have an exciting topic lined up today. You know, one of the most critical decisions that any board takes, that any existing CEO takes, and frankly, that any CHRO takes, is the recommendation on, senior leadership hiring. And today we're really going to deep dive and explore on some of the pitfalls, some of the things that can go wrong, and how we all can ensure that we apply best practice and give ourselves the very best chance of selecting the best candidate. So we're really looking forward to it. Shane has a great presentation to take us through, which I think will be great stimulus. But let's use the chat function, and feel free to unmute yourself if there's stuff that Shane talks about that you think is incorrect and you want to present a divergent point of view. This is really all about us learning together from each other, and I think that's the vision that Shane has outlined for this session, and I think that's why hopefully it will be really interesting for all of us.
Absolutely. And if you haven't seen Peter Baker on the amazing television show Bedazzled, where he leads with an amazing co-host, Career Tip Time. You also check that out on YouTube. Of course, that amazing co-host is myself. And if you want to check out the show,
7 p.m. Friday night, everybody. Set your TVs for BN4U Plus, where Shane and I go through Career Tip Time every week on the TV show called Bedazzled. So check it out. It's a lot of fun, and we've been getting some good feedback from folks that it's useful for them, and hopefully it is. But Shane, on to the core topic for today, which is really how to catch a con man CEO. Let's, is it a real issue? Is that a real, genuine issue? Surely in the world of digital footprints, it's very difficult for someone to be a genuine con man. So let's open up this issue and explore it.
Very sensitive topic, I guess. Peter asking me a loaded question right out of the gates. Of course, we do know there are some very active frauds in every market. And I think when I was starting my career, I was never trained for this. And it's always very disturbing when you're dealing with it. Because remember, when you're dealing with a group of criminals, they potentially can kill you. And when you're looking at a fraud where somebody's taking $50 million or $100 million, people kill people for a lot less. And a lot of times these frauds are being led by board members. So it's not just a CEO operating on their own. You know, you're not going to steal $50 million out of a company on your own. There's other people involved, and these people can be involved with very serious criminal organizations. So you really have to be careful how you handle it. We're going to talk about that. But some basic frauds, which I think Pete and Nasser, you guys, I'll probably deal with these. A lot of people might say it's not a fraud, but you can be charged with this, which is putting a fake degree in place and claiming fake results. And you do see that where companies will, where there's losses, they will charge the CEO. And I think we've seen that. I will be kind of careful not to mention names because I don't want to have a lawsuit at the end of this. The main thing is just share the learnings. And then, of course, you have the serious frauds where, I've seen companies where we had a health insurance company, for example, that was set up and had, hundreds and hundreds of staff, had its own building with many floors. And it was actually set up to issue fake insurance cards to laborers. And the contracting companies were in, and it was a multi-million-dollar fraudulent case that had taken on. So companies are set up for the sole purpose of committing a fraud, and those will be around. And then we'll talk a little bit around what do we do to detect from body language, graphology, signs and behaviors of a liar. Graphology is basically the study of handwriting, which is an extension of body language. And this is actually admissible in the court of law during a murder trial. And you have seen them brought in. I think in the Ted Bundy case, for example, graphologists were brought into the murder trial. So let's start with a real case, the fake doctor. So how do you fake a degree from an Ivy League school if you don't have one? Does anyone have an idea? The sad thing is I'm going to show you guys how to do some of these frauds by the end of it. I'm going to show you. Maybe that's why British intelligence is on watching me. I don't know. That was a bit nerve-wracking though. Jonathan, sorry, I'm not going to mention you again, but anybody out there, please just pipe up. We have some, is anyone saying in it? You can post your questions and comments. Nobody has an idea how you would fake an Ivy League degree? Anyone?
Hi, Shane. Hey, Shane. Hi, Francisca speaking.
Hey,
I have an idea.
In Australia right now, by the way, right?
Yeah. I have an idea, like, I don't know, you can have some contact that is a doctor and ask for his certificate, and today you can hire a experienced person that can do like Photoshop of paper, like fake document,
Right.
but I think maybe with the blockchain technology and smart contract, this fake thing can be in the future, can be fight. So can have short
So
life.
if you
in the
do
future.
that, when I call the registrar's office and I say, hey, does Francesca have a PhD in the material science from
Yeah.
MIT? The registrar's office will say no.
But I
So
can take the register officer of someone else, the register number of someone else.
yeah, but you have to change your name then.
Okay.
So
It was
So
Was a
first of all,
try.
you have to understand how these people are faking their degree before you can catch them. So here's a real
Okay.
case to ponder. Dr. John Smith claims to have a PhD from in material science from MIT. And upon contacting the registrar's office of MIT, they confirmed that, yes, Mr. John Smith graduated in 1995. So you feel during the interview, this is a real case. We felt that something was wrong, that he didn't have the PhD, and we didn't believe it. So after 3 months, we called the client and asked, how are things going with Dr. John Smith? And the client actually says, best hire we ever made. I love this guy. He's doing fantastic. Can you believe it? So what we did is we then contacted MIT and said, yeah, can you please send us in writing, because it was just over the phone. When they submitted the writing over the phone, we realized that Dr. John's middle name on his birth certificate is Alex, but on the school's degree confirmation, it's Ian. So what this guy had actually done is so if I go and I take Peter Baker, for example, and I take his birth date, and then I write to 500 of the top universities in the world and say, can you please confirm if Peter Baker had graduated from your school? The statistical probability that one of them will have a Peter Baker with the same name and the same birth date will come back and be like, yeah, Peter Baker graduated with a PhD in psychology in a year. Bingo. So now Peter Baker has his degree. And then what this guy does is he goes to the university and he reads the thesis paper and he studies it. So how did we catch him? So simple questions it's actually quite simple. You should never, ever have another person come into your organization with a fake degree, with a few simple questions. Anybody have those, or anybody want to guess what those are? Simple questions like, when you're on campus, where did you eat lunch? Where did you hang out? What was your favorite place which library did you study in? What desk did you stay at? Which dorm room did you stay in? Who is your landlord? Did you stay on campus or not? Who is your favorite professor? And as the person talks about it, they should be emotional. Like, oh yeah, I used to go down to, the Barn Door pub and hang out with my friend Al. He was crazy. And you have to kind of bring them back. Like, oh no, look, we're not going to talk about Big Al. We're going to get back to the interview. But someone who's a fraudster, he'll just basically, when you say, what was your thesis? Which professors are the counterbalance theses to the one that you presented? A lot of times people will say they have a PhD, and when you ask them what their thesis is, they say, oh, it was on international trade. That's not a thesis. A thesis is a hypothesis that's presented and then supported by evidence. And so a lot of people, when they claim their thesis, they're actually going to talk about a report. This is a big red flag. They don't have a real PhD. They can't describe their thesis, and they don't do it with emotionality. When you write a thesis, it's 6-7 years of your life. It's hours and hours of your life. So we want to see two main things that we're looking for: emotionality and detail. The second somebody starts talking about a business they started, a thesis they did, anything that's close to them, and you're lacking emotionality and detail, bingo, you got a problem on your hands. And again, be very careful. If you're dealing with a real calm person, you don't want to be up in their face. You want to be very pleasant and be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Let it go. And you're going to be, like a shark. You're going to circle. And what a shark does is it follows you and waits till you're tired, and it comes back in and takes another nibble. And so that's what you want to do. You want to just make a note, and you're going to circle back on it. So that was
in this case, Shane, you've checked with the company. The company is satisfied. What was the rationale for you guys to keep chasing to try to verify the identity? I mean, great proactivity from you guys, but what was the rationale, given that the company at the time, 3 months in, appeared to be satisfied with the performance of the individual?
Because I knew that, you know, when you interview a person and the way they're describing the PhD, that something's not right, that the guy was lying, and I couldn't prove it. And then, so we requested extra information just to verify, because it's impossible for someone to spend that many years of their life and to have such a laissez-faire approach to describing the PhD. And then you know, the guy had to get terminated. So the client didn't want to terminate the guy. This is another big problem. The client will have staff with fake degrees, and they'll ask the person just remove the degree and let them keep working. Well, this is a big problem, because this person believes that the way to get ahead in life is by lying, by cheating, and they have no problem doing it in a very formalized, organized way. So if you do not remove someone like this from your organization, they are going to end up creating the next Enron. Jeffrey Epstein, you know, the big sex offender,
sorry,
he started with a fake degree.
Shane, but like, sorry if I interrupt you, but like, I don't remember the name of the person that speak, but yeah, if let's say the result, the candidate is happy, and you know, this was the target, like, so the client is very happy, you want to keep him. Why don't ask why he lied? Maybe there is not bad intentional, you know?
Oh my God, thank you for this question. Never ask someone why. That was the problem with Jerry Epstein. They went and they said, oh, look, the guy has a fake degree. One of the partners said, oh, let me just talk to him and find out why this is. Remember, the best lies come from psychomaniac liars. You know, Ted Bundy would give you fantastic reasons why he was out late at night with a bunch of rope in his trunk. You know, you do not want to ask a professional liar for an excuse. The best excuses come from the best liars. The worst excuses come from people who tell the truth. And so you do not want to open the Pandora's box. If Satan is outside on your door, knocking on the door, you don't open the door and be like, well, Satan, what would you like? Let's just have a discussion about it. No, you bolt the door, you lock it, and you have a zero tolerance policy. You have to have a zero tolerance policy. Don't give them a crack. Don't give them an inch. And if I would say, when you're buying for yourself, because right now you're buying for a company, you have tolerance. When you're buying for yourself, you'll have zero tolerance. And I'll prove it. When you go to buy a car and someone says, oh, well, this Nissan was in a small accident, even if the accident was inconsequential, you will have a zero tolerance policy. You'll be like, oh, no, I'm not buying that car. It was in an accident. And it was like a fender, but it has no impact. But you have a zero tolerance policy. You need to have a zero tolerance policy. One of the chairman for Nestle Middle East, Eve, he said to me, he said, Shane, you know, in business, you're going to get what you tolerate. So you have to have a zero tolerance policy. I don't know, Pete, what do you say? Nasser looks like you're looking to jump in here.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a question about, you know, what kind of percentage we're dealing with, you know, what kind of percentage we're talking about over here for those who are doing fraudulent, basically, submission of resumes or whatever you want to call it. So basically, based on the Business Insider, the latest poll that they pulled, they said about 58% of the applicants, they exaggerate on their resumes in some sort of way or another. So basically, we're not talking about fraudulent basically degrees over here, but all in all, you know, 58% is a big number to talk about. So that's kind of concerning to start with. Now, in regards of the degree itself, yeah, it can. If someone is willing to, you know, put in a fake degree, then they're willing to do other basically actions as well, given the fact they're in the C-level type of basically position where they can execute, you know, different contracts or basically, you know, forge basically documents or do other, you know, activities, you know, while they're in the job itself. So I think, you know, that by itself is kind of alarming to start with.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, having some exaggerations on the CV is way different than faking an accreditation. And so, you know, I think you need to draw a distinction there. But still, every major company has staff with fake degrees in it. That's a fact. So let's look at the next one. The board has completed interviews. This is a true story.
And sorry, Shane, last question. Also, I'm not saying that it's good that the person fake the fact that you have a certification, but also you can see that sometimes have a certification doesn't mean that you cannot do the job if you don't have, like me. Sometimes some candidate is excluded because they don't have certification, but they have the skills to do the job anyway, you know. So also talent acquisition should also consider that sometimes the certificate is not everything.
But that's not what we're talking about fraud. So yeah, some people, whether you need the qualification or not is another deal. And sometimes people lie about qualifications that they don't actually need. So you also see, in this case, this guy was lying about a PhD, and he probably still would have qualified for a job with his master's because it was a chief commercial officer role. It's not necessarily that he needed a PhD. So let's look at another real life case. The board has already selected the CEO candidate, and they said, look, you know, Shane, can you just interview this guy and give us your report? So you start the interview and you just ask a very nice question, simple question. Hey, what's been your most profitable strategy to date? The CEO candidate comes back and says, well, 4 years ago, I started this new snack chip business, and I did 1.5 million in sales in less than 6 months. Now I'm just sipping my coffee. We're in a 5-star hotel, and you know, I just need to write my report, and I don't want to get in a fight because obviously this candidate is being endorsed by several board members. So for me to disqualify them is going to put me into locking horns with some very powerful people. So really, my motive is, you know, my best outcome is to, you know, have this guy move forward. Now, what's right away? There's a massive problem. What's the first red flag that you see in this?
In a very short time, he delivered such breakthrough results. So you have to ask the question of how. And that's how you penetrate.
No, that's a great point. So that's great. Yeah. So the result doesn't seem logical. And the second thing is I'm asking for profit, and he's talking about revenue. He's talking about sales. So that's another red flag. That the first thing I'm thinking is, you know, when you read an annual report, you can watch the chairman's statement. And if the chairman doesn't mention the net profit in the first 2 paragraphs of the annual report, it's probably because the net profit, he doesn't want to talk about it. Right? So I'm asking him for his most profitable result, and he's talking about revenue. So now I'm immediately alerted with a red flag that he did not generate a net profit. That's the first thing that I'm thinking. And the second thing is exactly what Kareem said, is like, why is this result so strong so quickly? So so the next thing is I ask him, how's the business doing now? And he says he left them 4 years ago, and but when he was there, they were doing great, and he doesn't know how they're doing now. So I asked 2 questions. And the second question I asked, you know, does anybody here has left the company and you don't know what's happening at that company 2-3 years ago? I mean, I used to work for a search firm in Toronto 15 years ago, whatever. I still know what everybody's doing. I know where my old boss is working. I know how the company's performing. I know who their clients are. I'm not even in the country, you know. So this is a lie. Whenever you hear that, and what's the third flag on this play now? Sorry, American football, you know, you got the flags. We throw the red flags up now on the play. Now there's a third red flag, which is why did he leave? Because if I started my own business and it's doing well, why would I leave? So now I've got problems, and now I'm thinking, wow, I'm literally 2 minutes in this interview, and this is going to be a can of worms. So how do you tackle this, and where do you catch the guy? So now you're suspicious that he actually did not drive net profit. You're suspicious that the results aren't good. What's the next question you're going to ask to trip this guy up? You want to ask him then, what was the capex on the project? So he drops that it was $10 million CapEx. So then I ask him, what do you mean by profit? What profit are we talking about? And sometimes as HR professionals, people are nervous to get involved with finance. If you want to be involved with senior hires, you really got to understand a P&L. You got to understand these differences. And it's amazing how many CEOs, this one simple question, tell me the difference between gross profit, operating profit, Ebitda, and net profit. That's a veritable bona fide question you can ask someone in this case. And how many CEOs can't answer it, which really tells you that they're not really financially literate. They're really just getting the financial statements from their CFO. They're taking a quick look at it and they're trying to manage their cash in versus cash out, which is what this guy actually meant. So just give you a quick overview of how this works for the revenue is 1.5. What this guy is talking about is cost of goods sales, which is what the cost of manufacturing his product is, minus his revenue is his gross profit. And that's what he's claiming. Should we allow him to get off with that? When you add in his salaries, his rent, utilities, he come up with an Ebitda number. And that's why a lot of CEOs will use Ebitda. Another huge red flag for me is when I sit down with a CEO and they start talking about Ebitda. Immediately, I'm going to be curious. Why? Because if you have a net profit, you're going to say net profit. So the second you say Ebitda, now I know there's problems. Why would you say Ebitda? We got some finance guys on the call here. I know we got some PE guys here too. Why do you say Ebitda? There's two reasons why you're going to use Ebitda. Number, if anyone's answering, or is somebody in the chat box? Is anyone no? Number one.
I can answer if you want.
Pardon?
I can answer if you want.
Yes.
So if the company is over leveraged and cannot service its debt, you only report Ebitda.
Sherrod Jane, one of the number one PE guys in the market. Thank you very much, Sherrod. It's great to hear from you. Sherrod is one of the denizens of the Middle East PE segment, and he's probably done more exits than most PE guys put together. It's really a pleasure having him. Not to mention, he was once ranked as the number one equity analyst in India for his segment, which is a huge accolade. So Ebitda, if you're over leveraged and if you have really expensive assets and you're depreciating them. So as we go down here, you look at the operating profit, still not bad. But when we get into net income, he's in the negative. And this is where the board had never pushed the guy on the numbers. And I just literally on the napkin in the hotel just started writing out, okay, what's your revenue? What's your expenses? What's your Ebitda? What's the difference? Asked them 3-4 questions and started falling apart. What's more important is this is a holding company. And you gotta watch out for what these guys do in these private businesses, which are not public. The practices that go on, you have to understand what happens. And it's not someone trying to commit a fraud. It's basically an entrepreneur, a business owner says, hey, I want to create a chip line. So where's the R&D cost of this chip line? Where's the marketing cost of the chip line? Because you're going to launch this chip. You can't do a marketing campaign for less than $1 million. What are you going to spend? Like, how far is $500,000 going to get you? So as you go into this, you realize that the guy is getting costs covered by the holding business, which now provides a bigger issue. And it starts to make sense because you don't start a company and then leave. So why did he leave? Because he's at the helm of the ship and he can see that this is heading into stormy waters. It's not going to be pretty. He's going to get axed. So he's leaving before the hatchet man gets to his neck. And the last piece, which Kareem has already pointed out, is that this 1.5 million, when your CEO is talking about revenue, he's either or she is trying to hide something or they're financially illiterate, because revenue is really not a great metric to work off of. And why is that? So these chips, the guy had a lot of relationships. He had relation with the retailers. They took the product, they put the product into the stores. He recognized it as revenue. And at the end of 18 months, the product didn't sell. It's been sent back to manufacturer. Now he has to provision the loss.
Shane, I want to add something, if I may.
Sure.
I think it's important also to ask questions with regards to the trends, because some people can hide behind 1 year kind of results, but it's not consistent. And CEOs with a proven track record have to show consistency of results year on year. So you have to ask questions like, what was it in the last 2 years? What are the trends looking like? How are your gross margins? So that the trends word versus just a snapshot. That's the point.
Yeah, you have to, that's absolutely right. And I also like to ask, how do you provision your sales forecast and your revenue? So if you're going to forecast, $5 million in sales for 2022, how are you provisioning your receivables? What part of those receivables will not be accounted for? And if the CEO doesn't have systems in place to deal with that, it's another red flag. And so here, the actual business, well, the guy sitting in front of me telling me he started a profitable chip line, somewhere across the city, the owners are shutting the business down and taking a $12 million loss that he's sitting in front of me telling me that he made profit on. And that the board members had bought the story because nobody pushed on the buttons. Shared and Kareem obviously would. So this is exactly what Kareem's talking about, the fake rainmaker. So everybody came in. So these are like really common statements. And I guess Kareem has had these a couple of times where one of the ones, some of the people I was working with said, oh, here's a great candidate. You got to interview him. So I sit down and he's like, I came in, the business was losing money, and in 3 months, I made the business profitable. And this was, and of all things, this was an amusement park. And I'm thinking like, there's no way that you can create, an amusement park is B2C. So, you want to drive footfall into your amusement park, you need to make a marketing program, you need a marketing jiggle. You can't even make a commercial or radio thing. You'd be lucky if you can make one in 30 days, let alone get your branding and your communication, your target customer right. So there's a huge flag on this play. Right away, I'm thinking, what are you talking about? It's not possible. So what happens is often the board is already restructuring a company. Part of that restructuring is hiring a new CEO. The new CEO comes in and new strategies, new marketing programs, new branding, new services are already rolled out. He plunks down in the seat or she plunks down in the seat. And that business would have hit profitability anyway. You could ask Sherrod on that because he's the private equity guy in the background who had been working on all those things. And the CEO sits in and says, hey, I made it profitable. So these are things that we want to look for. And I think what Kareem's also pointing out is look at those trends and understand what's the market growth rate and what are the competitor or comparable companies delivering in terms of revenue. And a simple question that I'd like to ask is, what's the size of your market? What's the growth of that market? And out of your sales, if you're going to get 15% sales, your market's growing at 3%. Where are you getting the other 12%? Who are you taking it from? And really strong CEOs will start to tell you, oh, by the way, company X just lost a big contract. So, that's an X $1 million tender that I'm going to take. By the way, this company, the CEO is leaving and we just took their top 2 salespeople. So I'm probably going to take about 50% of their portfolio. And he'll start to pinpoint exactly where the loose market share is. Which one of your competitors, I know, for example, one of my competitors just lost their top biller and their client accounts are going to be vulnerable. So that, you have the market growth rate and then you have where your market share is loose and where you're going to get it and why you're going to get it. So a couple other questions there. I don't know if that makes sense. So those are the small frauds covered. I don't know if anyone has any questions, or Pete, you've been pretty quiet, so it's hard to get a word in edgewise with me.
It is hard to get a word in edgewise, but I think you're absolutely right, Shane. I mean, and this is, of course, the challenge, right? There's a big difference between embellishing or perhaps putting somewhat of a positive spin on your achievements. Honestly, I think every candidate that you meet is going to do two things. They're going to slightly exaggerate the impact of their own efforts rather than necessarily the efforts of others, and that's natural. And then they will seek to put the most positive spin, right? So if revenues have risen but profits have not, they are going to emphasize revenue rather than profit. Or if they've managed to cut costs without growing sales, they'll emphasize cutting costs. So people will play to their strength. I think what's important here, and I think what the best search consultants do is understand, what are the key things that the client is looking for that are going to make the person successful in the role. And if profit growth is the thing that makes someone successful in the role that they're being hired for, then you've got to make sure that all of the questions are pinpointed against profit growth and not allowing people to get to be able to divert the topic to other areas. So I think that's really the key. That's why for me, the alignment on expectations and alignment on priorities is actually the most critical thing up front, and then make sure that you stay laser sharp in double clicking, triple clicking against the criteria that is important to the client.
So,
I would like to add one more thing, Shane. I like the idea where the gentleman stated, look at the trend and so forth. One more thing is to look, the insights for that CEO, especially if he's moving into the same industry, he will get to know where the capex, he can lower it down, or the opex, he can, make it, more appealing or more profitable to the company overall. Plus, probably, if you look into the chain value of the organization that he was working at, then you can trace back, from that balance sheet to that, chain value and how things are working out. Where is he making money? Where is he losing money, and so forth? And that will give you more insights of his capabilities and whether he knows his stuff very well or not.
Sure. No, thanks. I find this okay. This is not a business person, but Lance Armstrong had won 7 tour titles. I don't know if everybody knows this, but he actually passed 500 doping tests. And the reason why I'm showing this is that when you come to the table, even if you have a candidate that's been referred to you by royalty itself, and they have, the best Harvard degrees, and they have the best, references, you have to come to the table with the assumption that you're dealing with a con, that you're dealing with a fraud, that this is fake. And that's one of your best defenses. And because Lance had the stamp of the World Anti-Doping Agency 500 times, he was assumed by many to not be doping. Of course, we know the story now, but also Enron had won America's most innovative company many years in a row. So a lot of these frauds, they're not coming from, shady characters in a back alley. These are people who are outstanding members of the business community, who are being vouched for by other outstanding members of the business community that are publicly traded. And so under no condition should you assume that under any circumstance, under any qualification, that these people are not coming. And what you want to do is create a process of assessment for the CEO people that's signed up, that's part of the corporate governance of the company, that's signed off by the board. Your assessment process is signed off by the board, that this is part of your policies and procedures. And that's when someone comes with a wasta and says, someone who's a very senior person in the society says, hey, this is the candidate for the CEO job. It's not personal. You're saying, hey, we have our policies and procedures, so we have to walk through this 4-point assessment program, and I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to ask for these things. So you have to make sure that you put this into your policies and procedures. I don't know if that's clear, but if you don't, people can then feel that you're being personally attacking them. And when you have a VIP CEO candidate, say, for example, you have a controversial character like Donald Trump, and you're interviewing him, and he says, well, how can you interview me? I'm the greatest CEO of all time. I'm fantastic. You just say, listen, Mr. Trump, President Trump, this is our policy. I just have to do my job. I'm with you. I actually wouldn't say that publicly, but I guess I just did. So anyway, you want to fall back on your policies and procedures. So a couple other quick tricks that I use to try to keep up with these human calculators like Sherrod, who don't need these tricks to calculate things. So if you're not that financially astute, I just use the rule of 70. So if a CEO says, you know, hey Shane, you know, our revenue is $150 million. I'm gonna double in 3 years. Then you just take the 70, whatever the doubling years is. If it's 3, if it's 5, it's 7. If he said 7 years, you divide 70 by 7. It's 10 years. So you know that the guy's gonna that guy needs to deliver about a 10% growth rate in top line sales for the next 7 years to double. Or if it's 3 years, it's 23%. And then you just want to catch him to, again, no, if you're a real operator, you'll be hands-on. So again, what is the growth rate that you're going to need year on year to hit to double in 3 years? So he should say it right away. Well, what does that mean in market share? So if you're going to get a 23% increase in your top line, what percentage of market share do you have to take? And then what's the value of 1% of market share? So, and just ask these simple questions. There's a couple frauds here where I think if people use some of these success metrics, you would catch them. So for example, there was a hospital group posting 60% increase in their share price. But if you go to the hospitals and then when you ask them, oh, it's because we acquired XYZ hospitals. Well, when you go to those hospitals and you look at what's the profit per doctor, or what's the profit per bed, or revenue per bed, or revenue per doctor. And that metric's not necessarily put in the annual report. But at the end of the day, what is a hospital selling if it's not selling its doctors? So you want to know the profit per doctor, and all of a sudden you realize that that's below the industry norms. So why are we buying hospitals that have a lower revenue per doctor than international standards, but we're showing a massive growth in the stock price? Doesn't make sense. Another one we saw was a bank posting massive profits, but you know, when you divide the total revenue of the corporate bank by the number of RMs, and you look at revenue per RM or net profit per RM, these are metrics that you want to look at, by the way. Another big red flag is when you deal with a CEO or a board or a chairman and you ask them, what are the metrics you look at to drive peak performance in your business? And they say, oh, we use revenue and net profit. You know you've got problem. You've got a problem because that person is not going to be optimizing the business. So if you really are optimizing your business, you're going to want to know, if you're running a corporate banking team, are my RMs more profitable than the competition? Because if you're asking that question, you're going to be competitive. And so when you look at these metrics and all of a sudden you realize that my number's not there, you say, well, why is it? You realize that, hey, these guys just sold one of their assets. And so it's a total, you can expect that they're going to head into trouble the next year. F&B brand, I don't know. This was a local company that went global, F&B brand, and they basically had a massive top line growth. But when you went and looked at the individual restaurants, they had one of the lowest revenues per square foot. So if you said, well, how much food are you selling per square foot in your restaurant? It was the worst in the industry. But when you looked at the top line, they had one of the fastest growing top lines. How does that happen? And the reason is, it starts to become a little bit thinly veiled. I get in trouble here, but they sold 180 franchises in 3 months. So it was the franchise sales that's driving this top line. And then they're creating this media hype. People are buying this franchise. And in fact, the result's not there. But if anybody did a ground level assessment, so again, just go in and know the basic numbers for that industry. You'll catch a lot of these flags, as Kareem's saying, like if the number doesn't make sense. Another guy, a coffee house where their locations are in fringe economies where you know the per capita income of the population is super low, but they're posting 1,000% more revenue per location than a Starbucks. Doesn't make sense. Why is that? There's obviously something wrong. So you got to know your numbers and understand the core metrics when you get into these CEO assessments, and know what metrics that you want to be looking at for your business, and you'll catch most of this stuff. So I don't know if anyone has a question. I don't know how I'm doing for time. Running a bit tight on time. So let me give you one more example This was a scary one. So, the board and the group CEO, they're hiring for a divisional CEO. They say, hey, Shane, look, we got this guy. We want to move forward. We just, your job is done. Just, do a formality of an interview, send in your report, and we're going to offer him, and, everything's fine. You're going to get paid. And so fine, you start to interview this candidate. The candidate is being endorsed by the board. The candidate is very well known. The candidate has great references. And in fact, other outstanding people in the community call me and actually vouch for this person. On top of it, when the person speaks, it's like sitting with a Harvard business professor, like the commanding use of language, very great answers, just like amazing. Like it's somebody who's charismatic, intelligent. You just actually enjoy sitting with this person. And then he tells me that he has a company based in Switzerland where he's only an investor, and the company runs itself. And, other than that, he's pretty unemotional about it. And everything else is pretty much check out. So I get out of the interview and the CEO is like, okay, can we move forward? And I said, no, you can't. And why is that? Anyone know what the major red flag in these points is as to why this guy needs to, it's a major area of concern. We already gave you the answer at the beginning of the presentation, if anybody's paying attention. If you follow this, you can avoid, I saved the company probably $100 million on this, on this interview. And
what did you do in this case, Shane? What was the red flag that
the red flag is
that
right
told
here
you that there was an issue?
The red flag. Thanks, Pete, for helping me out. So the red flag is number 5. Okay, and so there is no person, like if you ask Nasser, tell us about digital Analytica, the guy's going to explode. Like you might as well just watch, like the fuse in your phone is going to blow, because he's going to get so excited about what he's doing and the transformations he's doing. And likewise, I'll tell you about my new billboard on Shakes Head Road. Pardon? What's that? Nancy, there you go.
I'm ready for it.
Absolutely. It's something you created. So here's a guy telling me, oh yeah, by the way, I have this company in Switzerland and it pretty much runs itself, and he's totally flat affect. The second big red flag here is, I don't know, Sharon has invested in so many companies. Sharon, have you ever seen a company that runs itself? Are they still there? But there's no such thing as a company that runs itself, because that's really insinuating that there's free money. If you have a lemonade stand and you're selling it for $5 a glass, I'm going to open beside you for 3. And then someone's going to open beside me for 2. And then someone's going to open for 1. And then someone's going to open for 50 cents plus a cookie. It's a race to the bottom in every market. So there's no company that does itself. And when I told this to the group CEO, he was epically upset, because obviously he wanted to move forward. And he said, well, what's the problem? And then when I told him, well, he wasn't really excited when he described his business in Switzerland, he turned red, and he was like fire, like in the cartoons coming out of his nostrils. And he's like, listen, Shane, don't mess around. Your invoice is paid. Just send me the report. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I need 2 weeks. I need to continue to check on this guy. And it was really upsetting. So first of all, there's no way I'm letting this slide, because when you're at the cocktail party and someone acts like this, it's a big red flag that they're involved in, that this is a fraudulent company. And so these are the 2 big points. And the third point is that there's no such thing as a founder who's silent. Okay. So also know that when you hire somebody who's a founder of a company, who's an owner of a company, they're never going to be 100% with you. Their heart's always going to be with other company, unless it's a fraud. So how do you catch this guy? What I did was slightly, well, the third thing was that it was a Swiss bank, the account for the company was a Swiss bank account, which I'm also very suspicious of. And this is the final one that the guy said in an interview. Whenever you hear this, this should be a massive red flag. Well, I've done everything I could in the business. The business running itself. There was nothing more I could do in the role, Shane. It was time for me to move on. It was time for fresh blood to come in. basically what that candidate is saying is that they didn't want to do anything more. Because there's no way in this age of disruption, of digital change, of transformation, of innovation, that anybody running any business can say, well, there's nothing more I can do. I've never seen it. I've never gone to a business and say, well, there's nothing else we can do to improve the revenue here. There's not, you've just knocked it out of the park. There's not a single company. So these are all red flags. So I thought there was a fraud. And what do you do? The way that you caught him, I don't know if I should be saying this, but you knew this tactic in high school, right? If your friend had kissed Jennifer and you wanted to find out, you would call him up and you wouldn't say, hey, did you kiss Jennifer? You would have said, hey, Jennifer's a great kisser, right? And then he would be like, so it's a very leading question. And then he gets caught. He's like, yeah. And then you're like, I knew it. Boom, right? You guys did this in high school. It's the same thing now, is that you look at people who are working in the company he was in that left. And I called them up and I said, hey, Alex, how you doing? I know you used to work at XYZ company. He's like, yeah. I just wanted to do a reference check and wanted to find out about the fraud that took place there while you were there. And I was recording these conversations, which of course you're not supposed to do, but the guy then says, the first guy says to me, I can't talk about this. If you want to talk about that, you need to talk to the board members. I have to go. And I'm like, whoa, this guy just hung up on me. I called a second guy. So I called 4 people who used to work at that company, no longer work there, and started with, I want to talk about the fraud that happened. Every single one of them got off the phone with me in about 15 seconds. So then I called the CEO back and I said, listen, I want to talk about the fraud that took place there. And eventually I figured out that there was a transaction that took place in a particular year. And I said, look, I want to know what happened with this transaction that took place in 2012 or whatnot. And then the CEO says, I don't know what you're talking about. Now I said, it's impossible for you as a CEO to not know about an irregular transaction that took place. I said, you now know that there's going to be a formal investigation that's going to go on. He says, fine. I said, okay. So then, I write my report and I submit it. And now I go back to the point that I started with, you have to be really careful. These are real criminals. They can kill you. So when you submit this report, you better be really careful what you say and what you write in there, because you don't know what will happen. Anyway, I was a bit bullish, and I probably shouldn't have written the report the way I did. The CEO calls me and says, this is really like outrageous what you've written. And I said, yeah. And it turns out that I was correct. There was a forensic audit the guy had set up. And what these guys do, this is the basic fraud that you always want to look out for. CEO comes in. Basically, the first thing he's going to sack is the CFO, and he's going to take control of the finances. He's going to sack the audit. He's going to bring in his own CFO. He's going to bring in his own audit. He's going to bring in his own legal. He's going to change the accounting system so people can't log in. If they're using Sage, he'll switch it to Oracle. Then he's going to set up dummy companies, and he's going to say, okay, this is a marketing company. This is whatever suppliers, and they're going to create fake invoices. They're going to invoice for services that were never rendered. That cash is going to go out of the company. That cash is going to be transferred to his Swiss bank account. Initially, the board is going to be fine because the guy's going to sack most of the headcount. So the net profit is going to go up. The revenue is going to stay the same. The board members are going to get the best dividends that they've had because, again, remember, hey, the company was losing money and now it's profitable. It's profitable because he slashed and burned the hell out of it. Then after a year and a half, 2 years after he's taken the money out, he's going to resign. Him and his CFO will leave together. That's another big red flag. Whenever the CEO and CFO leave together, you know that most likely there's an issue. Boards will never do that because they will never want to have that discontinuity at the top. They're going to want to keep the CFO and fire the CEO, or keep the CEO and fire the CFO. You're never going to want them both gone at once. When that happens, it's really a big flag that something was gone wrong. And in his last company, that's exactly what happened. These guys move together. They're like vultures. They go in, they commit this exact program, and who knows how much money they have. And at the end of the day, they're going to escape to a non-extradition country, and they got their money in the Swiss bank account and they disappeared. And that's what's going to happen. So I don't know. I think I'm running out of time here. So I don't know if anyone has any questions but just a quick little window into things we can do. Of course, we have the body language that we could talk about later, but we're going to talk about this again next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And I just want you guys to know, if you find this interesting, I was very fortunate to team up with SP Jain School of Global Management, and we've created the first ever certified CEO assessor course where we go through this in more detail. And it's a 2-day course. We set it up on a Friday and Saturday, so it won't affect you your work time. And we have very heavyweight group CEOs who are coming in as guest speakers. We have a professor of behavioral science talking. We have the CEO of SP Jain Dubai campus actually as a speaker. And we also have real live executive search consultants with real life hands-on experience. I don't know if I can coerce Peter to come in and share his experience, because I know Peter's caught a few comments in his day as well.
Always happy to do that, Shane. Always happy.
So if you'd like to join the course, it's there. And again, of course, you can join us again next Wednesday. If anyone has any questions, let me know. I'm very excited. Or if you feel there was anything wrong, I know there was a typo in the Excel sheet, so sorry for that. And thank you for calling me on that. I appreciate it. No questions here, or I think we had some questions in the chat box. No.
Yeah, let's have a look in the chat box.
At Laurel, so here we have from Jonathan Campbell. When working for a large regional retail company, I was employed to vet applicants. About 25% submitted false degrees. Yeah, it's rampant. It's really rampant. I had one guy, he said, oh, he had a degree from Indianapolis. I said, okay, where did you stay in Indianapolis? And he said, Indianapolis. I said, that's a state. You need to have stayed in a city. And then he just stared at me, and it was like an awkward silence. It was like fake degree all the way. So,
and I think that is one of the lessons, right? Is detail and specificity, whether you're hiring CEOs or whether you're hiring entry level or middle level, right? It's difficult for people to make up detail about something that didn't happen. So, I still always gravitate back in an interview, rather than asking generally, tell me, how do you solve a problem? Drill down specifically about a specific problem that the person solved and get them to describe it in detail. And it's very, very obvious when you're really getting people into that type of detailed discussion that you can't make it up. That's why I'm frankly always still a believer in behavioral interviewing rather than this kind of predictive interviewing. How would you go about it? And I think so that's a lesson, whether you're hiring for a CEO or hiring for an entry level, that same level of specificity and detail will always serve you well as an interviewer.
And I think the other thing is that you don't need to have, like some of the guys on this call, we have the MBA, CFA, CPA. You don't need these qualifications. You just need to think like an owner and ask simple questions. If I was investing $10 million, how much money would I want back? And you'd ask simple questions. Who is our customer? Why are they going to buy from us? How much market share is available? Where are we going to get that market share from? And so when a CEO says, I was running this business and I delivered this result, that's exactly how you break it down. And I think we also have somebody who is a very senior person in marketing, Mrs. Suzanne, who also says that consumer insight, who is your customer? Why do they buy from you? And where is your revenue coming from? And, the thing is that also in that example that I showed you guys, is that the CapEx is $10 million, but the guy's amortizing the cost over 20 years. If you had to liquidate the company, even if the guy delivers the 1 million sales or whatnot, you're still in losses massively. So in fact, you actually need to hit more than 1.5 million in sales per year if you're going to satiate, investor appetite or your investor hurdles. And this is where just doing that back of the envelope calculation really comes in, and asking the nitty-gritty details. And you find the guys drop the ball. Simple question like, what's your most profitable product? I sat down with a CFO. One of the great ways to tell if your CEO is competent is talk to the CFO. So I sit down with a CFO of an apparel business, and I said, hey, what's your most profitable SKU? And he doesn't know. And, I walked out of that saying, oh, you need to sack the CFO, but really you need to sack the CEO, because the only reason why the CFO is getting away without knowing it is because the CEO is financially illiterate and the CEO is not trying to drive peak performance in his business. Because if he did, he'd want to make sure the most profitable SKUs are in the consumer basket, which means you have to identify them. You have to create an L&D program. You have to make sure your sales staff knows what's the profit mix of the basket and how to get those profit SKUs in there. So again, it's very simple. You don't need to get into the business side of it. You can just say, as a business owner, what would I want? I want to know what my most profitable item is. It's a bona fide question. Again, they dropped the ball and you've got them in the trap there. Sorry, I talked too much about it. I was really excited about the thing. Musab, he says he has 1 point. It's a CEO issue and then a CFO one. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was saying. So
this is
the crowd is
obviously a topic
switched on.
that Shane
They're
has
ahead of the ball here.
huge passion for, as you can tell. So certainly do show up to sign up for the SP Jain School of Management program for those who are interested in that, where you can really cover this important issue in real depth. But Shane, we are right up against our 1 p.m. timing. What is on our webcast next week?
Yes, what is on there for the next, we're talking about the CEO. What's the actual, 1 second here. My screen is frozen. So we have a lineup all the way going to February 9th, where we will be basically showing and talking about all these core topics. So October 13th is we're talking about your CEO and managing a P&L. How financially literate should your CEO be, and what kind of financial skills, where's the line drawn that, hey, the CEO needs to be this financially literate to push the CFO, but then at that point, the CFO takes the skill set over. And where does that sit? And then the week after that, we're talking about, can your CEO lead your M&A strategy? Or, a lot of CEOs are like, oh, I was there for that acquisition. And really all they did in the room is say, yeah, I'll have sugar. I'll have a milk and 2 sugars, please. They really not really involved in the M&A. So what's the M&A skill? On October 27th, we're talking about what kind of financial metrics should you be using to drive peak performance in your team. The worst thing you want to see is a CEO who's just using the financial statements. These are accounting statements. They're not going to help you drive peak performance in your organization. So what should those be? And then we get into, in November, we're talking about how to know if your CEO is a rainmaker or not. Can they generate revenue? Leaders versus managers on November 10th. So a lot of great topics coming up. I really hope you guys come and enjoy the session. The recording will be available as well. I want to have a big thank you to Mr. Nasser Zagha from Digital Analytica. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nasser.
Thank you, Shane. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Pete, for coming out as well. We'll see you on Friday night at 7 on Bedazzled, Mr. TV star. And also thank you guys like Kareem, who's sharing your video and joining in on the session, and Francesca and Sherrod and Jonathan Campbell and Suzanne and so many others of you as well.
Nice. Shane, thank you for this.
Thank you. And of course, you can also pick up our book, CEO Assessment and Selection, if you want, which is available on Amazon. But if you don't want to pay, if you want free shipping, you can buy it from our site, and it has all the questions written in there if you want as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Ma salama. Bye for now.
Thank you. Ma salam.
Great session. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.